The program was cream-colored. That's the first thing I remember. Not my daughter standing at the altar, not the music or the flowers or the way the light came through those high church windows the way light does when it wants you to feel small. I remember the program, cream-colored paper folded once down the middle with a little gold cross printed at the top and her name underneath it. Denise Lorraine Hargrove. Hargrove. I sat with that word for I don't know how long, maybe 30 seconds, maybe the whole ceremony. A man named Gerald passed it to me when I came through the door, smiling. Didn't know who I was, just handing programs to whoever came in. And I took it, and I looked at it, and something in my chest, not my heart, deeper than my heart, something behind it, something back there just went still. Hargrove was Raymond's name, Raymond Hargrove, the man her mother married when Denise was 9 years old. A decent man, I heard, patient, present, all the things I apparently was not. I had met him twice. Once at a school play I showed up to 45 minutes late, and once at a birthday party where nobody quite knew what to do with me, standing there in the yard with a store-bought cake. Raymond shook my hand, both times. Firm grip. Looked me in the eye. I almost hated him more for that. I found a seat near the back. I told myself it was because I came in late, but I'd been late on purpose, if I'm being honest, because walking into a room where I wasn't quite sure of my place felt worse than just sliding in once the seats were full and nobody was watching the door anymore. I do that. I have always done that. Find the edge of things and stand there where nobody can ask me to explain myself. I opened that program and I read her name again, Denise Lorraine Hargrove. And I thought, when? When did this happen? When did she become Hargrove and stop being... I couldn't even finish the thought cleanly, because the truth was, had she ever been mine? Had she ever carried my name with any kind of pride? I sat there with the organ playing something I didn't recognize, and I thought about the last time I'd heard her say my last name. Webb. Calvin Webb. I am Calvin Webb, and I have been Calvin Webb for 71 years, and apparently that name meant so little to my daughter that she gave it back sometime before her wedding day and chose a different one, and didn't tell me. She didn't tell me. That's what I kept returning to, even while the bridesmaids walked down the aisle, even while some cousins sang a hymn that made the older women dab at their eyes. She had made this decision, a decision that you don't make overnight, a decision that involves paperwork and courtrooms and a judge somewhere signing something, and she had not told me. Not a phone call, not a letter. I don't even need a letter, a text message, anything. Something to say, Daddy, I want you to know before you see it somewhere that I've done this thing. But there was nothing, and here I was, 71 years old, holding a cream-colored program like evidence at a trial. The ceremony was beautiful. I know that. I could see it even through everything I was feeling. Her husband, Marcus, his name was Marcus, he cried when she walked in. Real crying, not performance. The kind where a man tries not to and can't help it. I noticed that. She wore white, and she was lovely, and she looked like her mother, the way daughters sometimes do, right at the moment, when you see them grown. Her mother, Yvette, was sitting on the other side near the front, and next to Yvette was Raymond, Raymond Hargrove, and Raymond was smiling the way a father smiles. I sat in the back with a program I couldn't stop reading. It was after, at the reception, that I found her. I had rehearsed nothing. That's important to say. because what came out of my mouth was not rehearsed. And I have spent years, I mean late nights and early mornings and long drives and all the empty space between those things, wondering if it would have gone different if I'd thought first, if I'd waited, if I'd pulled her aside quieter, softer, somewhere without music and people around. Instead, I found her near the cake table, and I said her name, her full name, and something in my voice must have told her immediately, because her face changed before I even said another word. I said, "When were you going to tell me you changed your name?" She looked at me for a moment, the way you look at something you've been dreading. Not surprised. Dreading. She said, "Not tonight, Daddy." And I said, "I think tonight. I think I've been sitting in that church for an hour, holding a piece of paper with a man's name on it that isn't mine, and I think tonight is exactly when." Her new husband was 15 feet away, talking to someone. People were all around us. She kept her voice low, and I did not entirely keep mine low, and I could feel, the way you can feel these things, people beginning to notice at the edges of the room. She said, "I changed it 3 years ago. I changed it legally. Raymond has been my father in every way that matters since I was 9 years old, and I wanted his name, and I don't owe you an explanation for that." I said something then. I don't know exactly what words I used. Something about blood. Something about the fact that I was her father before Raymond ever knew her name. Something about how a man deserves to know when his child erases him. And she looked at me. And this is the part I still see at night. This is the part that lives in my chest like a stone. She looked at me with something that was not anger. It was patience, the kind of patience you give to someone who has used up their chances. She said, "You don't have the right to be hurt by this. You don't have that right. You gave it up a long time ago." Then she straightened her dress and she walked back toward her husband. And I stood there next to that cake. And something in me, and God, help me. I have tried to explain this to myself for years since. I have tried to find the word for what it was. Something in me went cold and small, and decided that if I was nothing to her, then she would know exactly what nothing looked like. What I did next, I have never told anyone. Not my sister. Not the woman I was seeing at the time. Not the pastor I talked to once, years later, who got close to asking the right questions and then went in a different direction. Nobody knows what I did next except me. And I suppose whoever it is I'm talking to in this dark, in this room, in this whatever this is that happens when an old man can't sleep and decides to finally say the thing out loud. I found Marcus, her husband, my daughter's husband. He was at the bar getting drinks, laughing with his brother, still wearing that look on his face from when he first saw her walk in. I introduced myself. I shook his hand. I said I was Denise's father. He smiled genuinely and said he'd heard about me, and something about that, the way he said it, like he wasn't sure how much to show, told me that yes, he had heard about me. And it wasn't all good, which I knew. I knew what Denise had told people about me. I knew the story she carried. But I smiled back, and I told him something. I told him a thing that Denise had told me years ago, years before, when she was 23, and we were briefly close, briefly. There was a period of maybe 18 months when she called me sometimes, and we talked, and she was trying, I think she was genuinely trying to have something with me. And in that window, she told me something about herself that she had never told anyone else, something private, something that didn't make her look perfect. I had held it all those years the way you hold something sacred because she had trusted me with it, and she had said, "I'm only telling you this, Daddy," and I trusted her trust. I used it. I told Marcus that thing. I told him in a quiet voice at the bar while his brother had gone to the bathroom, and I watched his face change. And I said, I thought he should know. I said, a husband deserves to know these things. And I dressed it in the language of concern, the way you dress a wound in something clean to hide how dirty the knife was. He thanked me. He didn't know what else to do. He thanked me, and he nodded, and he looked across the room at his new wife, and I saw something shift behind his eyes. That's what I did on her wedding day. I have been 71 years old now for almost 8 months, and there is not a single night where that moment does not find me. That bar, that man's face, the thing I said. I have run from it in every direction a man can run, and it finds me every time, because it is the truest thing about me, and I have spent most of my life not wanting to know the truest thing about myself. Let me go back. Let me go back to before any of this, because none of what I did at that bar makes sense without the before, and even with the before, it doesn't make sense. Not really. But at least you can see the shape of a man and understand how he got to a place like that. I grew up in a small house in a city that's been half torn down and rebuilt since then, so that I don't quite recognize it when I drive through. My mother raised us, me and my sister Loretta, and my father was there until I was about 12. And then he wasn't. He didn't die. He just one day was less present, and then absent, and then eventually I understood that there was a woman somewhere, and that woman had become his life, and we had become something else. I have thought about that a lot in the context of what I became. I have thought about it more than I should, probably. The way a thing passes down without anyone meaning to pass it down. I met Yvette when I was 26. She was 23. She laughed at something I said, and the laugh was genuine and real, and I held on to that. She was the kind of woman who made a room feel inhabited. You know what I mean. Some people walk into a space, and the space becomes more itself. Yvette was like that. We were together for 4 years before Denise was born, and then for 3 years after, and then we were not together. I am not going to say it was all her fault. I am old enough now to know that the stories I told myself at 32 about who was to blame for what were just stories I needed to keep living without looking too closely. What I know for sure is that I was not there the way a man should be there. I was working, yes. I was providing when I could. But there is a difference between providing and being present, and I understood that difference in my head without ever managing to actually live it. Denise was 3 when we separated, 7 when the divorce was final. Raymond came along when she was 8 and married Yvette a year later. I spent the first years of that arrangement resenting him, which was easy. He was in the house. I was not in the house. That felt like something he had done to me, rather than something I had allowed by not being there. I saw Denise on weekends when I got it together enough to show up. Sometimes I got it together. Sometimes I didn't. I'm sitting here in the dark at this hour of night, not softening that. Sometimes I called and said I was coming, and I did not come. I had reasons. I always had reasons. Work, money, distance, trouble with Yvette over something, my own mood which could go dark in those years in ways I didn't understand until later. The reasons always felt real when I was inside them, and I know now they were just the shape of me not being brave enough to keep my promise to a small girl who was waiting by a window. She stopped waiting at some point. Kids do that. They don't make an announcement. They don't have a conversation with you about it. They just one day stop looking toward the door and start looking somewhere else. And by the time you notice they've stopped waiting, they've been gone from that window for years. I noticed when she was about 11. I came for her birthday. I did come. I remember this specifically. I was proud of myself for coming, and she was polite to me. That was the word that broke something. Polite. She thanked me for the present, and she said it was nice to see me, and she asked how I was doing, and it was like talking to a child who had learned manners specifically for this situation. Raymond was in the kitchen making food, and I could hear Denise go back in there after she'd said hello to me, and I could hear them talking easy and natural, the way people talk when they're used to each other. And I sat in the living room and understood something I had been avoiding understanding. I was a guest. In my daughter's life, I was a guest. Raymond was the resident. I drove home that day, and I told myself I was going to change things. I was going to show up differently. I made that promise to myself on the highway, and I kept it for a few months, showing up more, calling more. And then life did what life does, and I drifted again. I have drifted in and out of things my whole life, without ever quite understanding why I couldn't hold my own intention. There was a period when she was in high school that we had almost nothing. A birthday card from me, sometimes. A check sometimes, though I was struggling then financially, and the check was often late or wrong. Yvette didn't hide how she felt about the checks being late. I didn't hide how I felt about her not hiding it. These conversations would happen when I picked Denise up, and Denise would sit in the back seat of my car with her face turned toward the window, and I would drive and say nothing, and she would say nothing, and I would tell myself she was just being a teenager. She was not just being a teenager. She was being a girl who had watched her parents resent each other across her childhood and had decided to go quiet as protection. College. She went to college, and I helped what I could, which was not much. Raymond and Yvette paid for most of it. I know that. She came out with a degree in something to do with healthcare administration, and she got a job and she built a life, and she called me on Christmas and my birthday, and sometimes not even that. And I told myself this was normal. This was just how it goes with adult children. They get busy. They have their own things. Those 18 months when she was 23. I go back there often. There was a moment, I remember it at a kitchen table, coffee between us, winter outside, where she looked at me and said she wanted to try to have a real relationship. Those words. A real relationship. Like we both knew what we'd been having before was the version without the realness in it. I said yes. I said I wanted that too. And for a while, we did something that looked like it. Phone calls that were not just obligation. She visited once, and we watched a game, and she laughed at something I said the way her mother used to, and I felt it. I felt like there was still time for something. In that window, she told me something. I don't want to say exactly what it was even now. It doesn't feel right to say it plainly, even to the dark. What I'll say is that it was from when she was younger, late teens or early 20s, something she'd gone through that she'd carried alone, and she told me because she was trying to be real with me, because a real relationship means you tell the real things. and she said nobody else knew. She said, "I'm only telling you this, Daddy." And I held it. I held it for years. And then on her wedding day, I used it to wound a man she loved. Why? I have asked myself why so many nights that the question has worn smooth inside me, no edges left on it, just a round, smooth thing that I turn over and over and get nothing back from. Was it the name on the program? Was it being told I had no right? Was it 30 years of being a bad father suddenly becoming someone else's fault in my mind? Is it just that I was small? Small in some fundamental way that I had never fixed, and smallness needs to express itself somewhere. All of it, probably. None of it explains it. Explanations aren't the same as reasons. There is no reason. What I know is this. Marcus went back to his wife at some point that evening with something different in him. I watched it happen from across the room. Not a scene. Nothing dramatic. He handed her a drink, and something in his face had closed a little, the way a door closes when someone pulls it only part way. She noticed, I think. She's a perceptive woman. She looked at him, and then she looked around the room, and her eyes found me, and she held the look for a moment, trying to read something, and then someone pulled her away into conversation. I left before the dancing started. I drove home in the dark, and I remember thinking, good. I actually remember thinking good, which tells you where I was inside myself at that moment, what kind of closed and shrunken place I was living in. Good. That thought lasted maybe 2 days. Then it began. The thing that has followed me since. Not haunting. Haunting is the wrong word, because haunting suggests something visits and leaves. This is more like weight, like something added itself to what I carry and has been there since, not visiting, residing. I found out later that they went through a hard first year. I heard it through my sister Loretta, who heard it from someone who knew Yvette. They had a rough stretch, counseling, loud arguments in the apartment that the neighbors heard. Whether what I told Marcus was the cause or just one element, I'll never know for certain. But I know what I said, and I know what I saw on his face, and I have no real doubt that I planted something that grew into whatever it grew into. They are still together, as far as I know. It's been 11 years. They have 2 children, my grandchildren, though I have never been in a room with them. Denise and I have not spoken since that reception. Not a word. A silence of 11 years, which is the longest silence between us, longer than when she was in school and longer than when she was a teenager with her face turned toward the window. This silence has a different texture than those. Those silences had some kind of latent possibility in them, the chance that something could still be said. This one feels like a door that was shut from the inside, locked, and the key thrown somewhere I will never find. She doesn't know, I think, exactly what I told Marcus. Or maybe she does. Maybe he told her eventually, and she knows everything. I don't know. I have written letters I didn't send, 3 of them. One of them I got as far as addressing the envelope, and then I sat with it for a week on my kitchen table, and then I put it in a drawer, and then I moved, and the drawer stayed behind. I am 71 years old. I have a granddaughter I have never held. My sister told me her name is Imani. I have a grandson she named Jordan. I have held those names in my mouth quietly. Sometimes, in the mornings, the way you hold something that belongs to someone else and that you have no right to but can't put down. Imani, Jordan, my daughter is out there somewhere tonight, and I don't know what room she's in or what she's thinking about, and she doesn't know I'm sitting here in the dark trying to say something true for the first time in my life. The name. I keep coming back to the name. Hargrove. I have to be honest about it, honest in a way I haven't let myself be, which is this. She wasn't wrong. She was not wrong that Raymond Hargrove earned that name in ways I never earned mine. He was at every school play. He went to every teacher conference. He drove her to Saturday practices and doctor appointments, and he sat up when she was sick, and he held the flashlight when the power went out, and he was present on the 340 days a year when I was not. He loved her with consistency, and I loved her with intention that collapsed every time life put any pressure on it. There is a difference. I know the difference now in a way I didn't at that reception standing by the cake table. She chose his name because he earned it. She didn't tell me because she knew what I would do. She knew. She knew me better than I knew myself. She knew that I would make her choice about my wound, and she wanted one day in her life to not manage my feelings, and I walked in and proved her right in the first 5 minutes. And then I did the thing at the bar. God, there is no version of looking back at that where I find any mercy for myself. I have tried. Old men try to find mercy for themselves because the alternative is a darkness you can't quite survive in. But even mercy has to stand on something, and I look for the ground under that mercy. And there is no ground. I was not drunk. I was not out of my mind. I was cold and deliberate, and I used something private she gave me in a moment of real love, and I put it in the mouth of the situation, like a stone. I have thought about whether I am a bad man, not whether I did a bad thing. I know I did a bad thing. The clarity on that has never wavered. But whether the thing I did reflects something essential about what I am. Whether underneath the reasons and the circumstances and the childhood and the father who left and the patterns I never broke, underneath all of that, there is just a man who, when pushed, will push back harder than he should. Who, when hurt, will look for the most precise way to hurt in return. I have thought about whether that is what I am at my core. I don't know. I used to believe that people were better than their worst moments. Now I think that depends on how bad the moment was and what you do with it afterward. I have not done anything with it. I have not gone to Denise. I have not told Marcus that what I said was a cruelty dressed as concern. I have not done any of the things that would let me sit here and say, I have tried to fix this. I have sat in this thing like a man sitting in a house that's slowly filling with water, who keeps thinking he'll leave in a minute. The water's pretty high now. My body knows how old it is in ways my mind still resists. I get up in the night and I feel the years in my knees, in my lower back, in the time it takes my eyes to adjust to the dark. There is a specific quality of quiet that comes in your 70s in the middle of the night that is different from any other quiet. It has a weight to it. It asks questions. I think about what she looked like at 11, the girl who said hello to me politely at her own birthday party. I think about how I drove home from that birthday with the intention to be better, and the months after when I was briefly better, and then the slow drift back. I think about how many times I have had that experience of deciding to be better, and the deciding being the peak of it, the most real part of it, and the actual being better being shorter than the deciding every single time. I think about those 18 months when she was 23, the kitchen table, the coffee, winter. She was trying to give me something. She was trying to give me access to the real version of her. And I accepted it. And I said, yes, yes, I want this. Yes, I'm going to be the father you needed. And for a while I was something close to that. And then what happened? What happened is what always happens with me. I got comfortable. I let the calls get less frequent. I had a situation with a woman I was seeing that took my attention. Small things became reasons. And then one day I realized she was calling less. And I told myself she was busy. She had her life. She was happy. And the truth was, she had clocked it again. She had watched me drift again. And she had quietly stopped giving me the rope to drift with because she only had so much rope left. And I didn't fight for it. That's the thing I can't make right in my mind. I noticed her pulling back, and I let her pull back. I didn't call and say, I see what's happening. I don't want this to happen. I'm sorry I keep doing the thing I keep doing. I'm going to be different. I just let it go the way I let everything go. The way my father let things go. The water finding the easiest path. She must have changed her name sometime in that silence. Made the decision. Went to the courthouse or wherever you go. Signed the papers. Became Hargrove. And she didn't tell me. And I understand now why she didn't tell me. Because she had already told me everything important and watched me put it down. The name was just the last thing she took back when she took everything back. I am saying her name in this room now. Denise. I haven't said it out loud in a long time. My sister says it sometimes when she's telling me things I'm pretending not to need to hear. But I haven't said it out loud myself, in my own voice, in my own space, since I don't know when. Denise. It's a name her mother chose. I was consulted, but Yvette had already decided. You could tell. It was Yvette's name, and I agreed. There's something fitting about that. Even her name was Yvette's, and then Raymond's, and never particularly mine. Imani, Jordan. Those two sit with me heavier, most nights than anything else. Because with Denise, there is history, there is cause and effect, there is a clear line from what I did and didn't do to where we ended up. But with Imani and Jordan, there is just absence. They are children who do not know I exist or know of me only as a vague shadow their parents have not given them much information about. They are growing up in a house that does not include me, and they are not losing anything they ever had. I am just not there, the way my father was just not there. And they will grow up and become adults and have their own lives, and at no point will they sit in a kitchen with me and try to build something real, because there will be nothing to build from. I have broken the chain of a thing, and the thing is just showing up. The simplest thing. The thing that costs nothing but presence, and costs everything if you don't have presence to give. I don't know what was wrong with me. I know what I've told myself over the years. My own father. My depression, which I didn't have a name for until I was in my 50s. And a doctor said the word, and I recognized it the way you recognize a face in a dim photograph. The way I grew up understanding manhood as provision and confusing provision for fatherhood. The years I drank more than I should. The work that was genuinely hard and the exhaustion that was genuinely real. All of it true. All of it insufficient. You cannot explain your way out of a child standing by a window waiting for you. I am sitting here in a room, in a house, that is quieter than any house should be at this hour, and I am thinking about a cream-colored program with gold ink and a name that wasn't mine, and the way that single piece of paper told me a whole story in one second. Denise Lorraine Hargrove. I should have put the program down and sat in that church and watched my daughter get married with grace. I should have been grateful I was even there, that there was even an invitation in my name, because she didn't have to invite me, and she did. That is something. That is something I have not let be enough. She invited me. She wanted me present, or she wanted to try having me present. She had opened a door, and I walked through it, and walked directly to her on her wedding day, and made her pain in the place she was trying to have joy. And then I did the thing at the bar, the letters I wrote and didn't send. The first one was 2 months after the wedding, 6 pages. It said everything in a way that was still mostly about me. I can see that now, looking back. It was an explanation of myself more than it was an apology. It was me building a case for my own complexity, saying, here is why I am the way I am. Here is the context. An apology that explains itself is not really an apology. It's a negotiation. I put that letter in a drawer. The second was a year later, 3 pages, less explanation, more admission. I wrote, I used something you trusted me with, and I used it against you. I wrote that plainly. I came close to sending it. I addressed it. I bought a stamp. But I thought, what if she shows Marcus? What if this becomes a whole thing? And I told myself I was protecting her from that complexity, but I was protecting myself from the consequence. And I know the difference. And I put the letter in a drawer and moved to a new house, and the drawer stayed behind. The third one I wrote 2 years ago. 1 page. Just an apology. Just, I am sorry. I am sorry for what I did at the bar, and I am sorry for the years before, and I am sorry for the name on the program that was my fault to begin with. 1 page. I wrote it, and I folded it, and I put it in an envelope with no address on it, and it's been in a box in my bedroom closet ever since. There is a man who sends the letter, and there is a man who puts the letter in a box. I have always been the second man. My sister Loretta calls me on Sundays. She lives 3 states over, and we are close in the way that siblings who grew up in difficulty are close, a closeness that doesn't require much explaining. We just understand each other's silences. She has asked me about Denise. She asks carefully, the way you ask around something. She doesn't press. Loretta knows what I did. Not the whole of it, not the thing at the bar, but she knows that I said something at that reception that I shouldn't have said, and she knows Denise and I have not spoken since. She says things like, you know it's not too late. She says things like, your grandchildren are getting older. Calvin, they are growing up without you. She says these things, and I listen, and I say I know, and she says, well, and then we talk about something else, because there is only so many times you can push against a wall before you accept the wall. I am the wall. I have been the wall in so many people's lives. Not mean, not cruel, not usually, not until that wedding. Just unavailable, in some way that I could never name or fix. Behind glass, present in the room, but not quite touchable. Yvette used to say, you are here, but you are not here. I thought that was unfair when she said it. I thought she meant I wasn't trying hard enough. Now I think she meant something more specific than that. Something about the quality of my presence. How even when I was physically in the room, there was a distance that she could feel, that Denise could feel, that a child can feel before she has the words for what she's feeling. I don't know if that's fixable. I tried to fix it, some. I got older, and I got better at being in the room in a way I wasn't when Denise was small. But the timing of growth matters. If you figure out how to be present after the people who needed your presence have already stopped needing it, after they've built their lives and found their Raymonds and taken their Hargroves. The growth is still yours. It still happened, but it didn't happen for them. Raymond Hargrove. I have thought about him more than I've let myself admit. Not with hatred. The hatred I had when Denise was young for the man who was in the house has softened over decades into something more like reluctant acknowledgement. He was there. He was there in the way that mattered, and I was not. I can sit with that now in a way I couldn't at 35, at 40, even at 50. He loved her in ways that accrued. He showed up in ways that compounded. When she was 32 years old and standing before a judge and choosing what name to live the rest of her life in, she chose the name of the man who had been reliably there. I think about the moment she made that decision, whether she thought about me when she made it, whether it was hard, or whether by that point it had become something that simply made sense, like putting on the right coat after years of wearing the wrong one. I hope it felt clean. I hope it felt like relief. I am enough of her father, still, even in absentia, even in failure, to want her to have had one clean thing that was just hers, that was just right, that was just simple. The irony, the heavy, particular irony of a man who spent his daughter's childhood not showing up, being the one to stand at the cake table asking why she gave his name away. I have laughed at myself for that once or twice. A short, dark laugh, the kind that isn't really funny. She was right. She was right that I had no right. She said it to me that night like a woman who had rehearsed it, or maybe like a woman who didn't need to rehearse it because it was just true, because the truth is the one thing you don't have to practice. I had no right. I had given up the right incrementally, year by year, missed visit by missed visit, call by missed call, birthday by late birthday, until the account was empty. And I came to her wedding expecting to make a withdrawal. There is nothing in this reflection that is comfortable. I am not looking for it to be comfortable. I am old enough to know that the comfortable version of a thing is the version where you don't look at it directly, where you stand at an angle to the truth and see a shape that doesn't make you sick. I have stood at the angle for a long time. In this room, in this dark, I am trying to look at it directly. The thing I did is the one I will die with. I know that now. There will be no resolution. I believe that. The letter in the box is never going to get sent, not because I don't love my daughter, but because I am the second man, the man who puts the letter in the box. And that is what I am, and I'm too old now to believe I will become the first man. You run out of time to become different people. That is what being old is, in part. It is running out of time to be different. But the knowing is still there. That's the thing nobody tells you about guilt when it's real, when it's earned, and not just regret. It doesn't diminish. Shame can diminish. The acute feeling of something can fade to something chronic and livable. But the knowing stays sharp. The knowing that I looked a man in the eye on his wedding day and put poison in him, that stays sharp. The knowing that somewhere Imani is learning to read and Jordan is learning to ride a bike, or whatever it is they're doing now. They're growing. They're becoming. And I am this absence in their family story that nobody is talking about. That is sharp. I think about Denise at 11. I keep coming back to 11. I don't know why that age specifically. Maybe because that birthday was the last time I remember wanting to change and still feeling like I could. After that, something settled. After that, we became what we became, and it calcified slowly. But at 11, she was still this person who said hello to me politely, and there was something behind the politeness that might have been wishing, just a little, that things were different. Or maybe I'm putting that there. Maybe I'm giving myself the small mercy of imagining that she still wanted me at 11, when the truth might be that she had already accepted the thing that was true. The thing that was true was Raymond. Raymond in the kitchen. Raymond making food. Raymond knowing exactly where everything was in the house because it was his house and he lived in it. I sat in a living room, in a house that was not mine, in my daughter's life that was not mine, and I understood I was a guest. And then, instead of earning my way out of being a guest, I spent the next 20 years still trying to collect what guests don't get to collect. Grandfatherhood. I would have been different as a grandfather. I believe that the way you believe things, you'll never be able to prove. Something happens to men sometimes when they have distance from the urgency of their own lives, and they can just be present without all the noise. I see men my age with their grandchildren at parks, at little league games, at the grocery store, and there is something in those men's faces that is simpler than anything I see in younger fathers' faces. Like the striving has gone down and the seeing has gone up. I think I would have been like that. I think about Imani, and I think I would have told her things. Slow things. The kind of things you learn over a life that have no practical use, except to make a person feel less alone in the world. I would have had time for her in a way I never had time for Denise, or never made time, which is the same thing, and isn't, both at once. I think about Jordan, and I think, I would have shown him things. Not much. I am not a man of many skills, but there are things I know. I know how wood works. I built things when I was younger, furniture, basic things. And there is something clean about working with your hands that a boy should know. I would have shown him that. I would have been patient in the way of old men who have already made all their mistakes and just want to watch someone young do something right. None of it matters, because none of it happened and none of it is going to happen. The box in the closet, the 3 letters. Some nights I think about sending the 3rd one, the 1-page one, the just, I'm sorry. I think about it, and I think, what would it do? Would it open a door, or would it just cause pain? Would it just remind her of a thing she has organized her life around not having to think about? Would she show it to Marcus? Would Marcus wonder? Would it pull something loose in a life that has been stitched together over 11 years by 2 people who have worked hard to do the stitching? Maybe the most loving thing I can do at this point is hold the letter. Maybe the one truly decent thing I have left to offer is my silence. I don't know if I believe that, or if I am just talking myself into the box again. Loretta called last week, and she said Denise had posted something on the internet, a photograph, family picture, all 4 of them, Marcus and Denise, and the 2 children at somewhere that looked like a park, or maybe a picnic. She described it to me. Loretta knows I don't have accounts on those things. I can't be on there looking at a life I'm not in. I don't have that kind of stamina. She described it, and she said, she looked happy, Calvin. She looked really happy. And I sat with that. I sat with it the way you sit with something that is simultaneously the best and the worst news. Because I want her to be happy. I want that with a ferocity that I have no right to give an everything. She is my daughter, and the wanting for her to be okay, to be more than okay, to be happy in a real way in a park with her children and her husband. That is the thing in me that is cleanest, the part of me that actually resembles fatherhood. I want her to be happy, and she is happy, and I am here. These two things are not contradictions. I used to think they were. I used to think that if she was fine without me, then I had not mattered, had not counted. My absence had not done real damage. Now I think the opposite. I think people carry damage and build around it. I think Denise built a beautiful life, and she built it in the shape of her damage, and the building is real, and the damage is also real, and both things are true at the same time. I am in the damage. I am in the shape of the life she built to manage what I left. Raymond is in it too, but differently. He's in the part that held. I'm in the part that had to be compensated for. That is my legacy. Not the worst legacy a man can have. Not the best. Somewhere in the middle, where most of us end up if we're honest. In the middle. Neither heroic nor monstrous. Just human in ways that hurt people who deserved better. Except for the bar. The bar is not in the middle. I used to think I was a man of ordinary failures. Ordinary absenteeism. Ordinary selfishness. The kind of failings that can be named and acknowledged and may be forgiven over time because they are common, because they are the shape of many men's lives, and there is a kind of impersonal suffering in being failed by something common. But what I did at the bar was not ordinary. What I did was precise, calculated. It was targeted at the most specific vulnerability and deployed with the clarity of someone who knew exactly what he was doing and did it anyway. That is different. I have to sit with that being different. My father. I think about my father now in ways I never could when I was younger. When you are young and your father is a failure, you carry the failure as your wound. When you are old and you have failed in similar ways, you carry it differently. I think about him now, not as the man who left, but as a man who was probably sitting somewhere in a room like this one, with a thing inside him he didn't know how to say. I think about whether he thought about me, whether he sat up at night and turned the silence over, looking for something in it, whether he wanted to send a letter. He died when I was in my late 40s. We had not been close. His funeral was a small thing, and I stood at the edge of it the way I always stand at the edge of things, and I felt something I couldn't name then and can maybe name now, which is, we wasted it. We wasted whatever was possible between us by both of us waiting for the other one to be different first. Denise and I have wasted it too, but I am still alive. That is the small remaining fact. I am 71 and my knees hurt, and the dark has that quality it gets, and I am still here, still alive in this specific night, still the man who could walk to the closet and take the letter out of the box and find an envelope and write her address on it and put it in the mail. I am still the man who could do that. I have not done it. I am going to be honest about why, not the reason I usually give myself, which is about protecting her, which is about not reopening things, which is all probably partially true. The real reason, the reason behind the reason. I'm afraid of what she says back, or more than that, I am afraid of the silence after. I am afraid that I send the letter and there is nothing, no response. The letter arrives and is read or is not read and is put somewhere or thrown away, and my name does not change in her phone from whatever it currently is or isn't, and I'm in the same place I am now, except now I know definitively that the door is locked from the inside with no intention of opening. That is what I am afraid of. I'm afraid of knowing for certain what I already suspect, which is something, which is its own small, awful truth about me, that I am protecting myself with the possibility of the unsent letter rather than accepting the risk of the sent one, that the uncertainty I am living in is more comfortable than the certainty would be, and I am choosing the comfort. At 71, still choosing the comfort, still finding the edge of the room, and standing there where nobody can ask me to explain myself. There is a sound the house makes at this hour. It has been making it for years, and I know every variation of it. And tonight there is a wind outside, doing something to the gutters, and the furnace is cycling, and under it all there is a silence that is older than any of these sounds. In that silence, I am thinking about Denise at 3 years old. This is a memory I have that she doesn't know I have, or doesn't know the way I hold it. She was 3, and I was still living with her and her mother, and she used to come into the living room in the mornings before either of us was properly awake, and she would climb into my lap and just sit there, not asking for anything, not talking, just sitting, like the lap was a location she'd decided was hers. Those mornings I was fully present without trying to be. Before I understood that presence was something I would struggle to provide. Before I had failed at anything yet, or nothing large enough to weigh. She would sit in my lap, and we would watch whatever was on the television in the early morning quiet, and I would smell the top of her head, which smelled like sleep and child, and I would think, this is it. This is the thing. This is what the whole enterprise of living is for. I knew it. I knew it then, and I still lost it. That is the thing I cannot make fit anywhere, the thing that falls outside every explanation I have for myself. I knew what mattered, and I still chose things that mattered less. That is not ignorance. That is not circumstance. That is something in me that chose wrong, repeatedly, with full knowledge of what I was choosing, and I have spent 50 years trying to call it something else, and it is getting late now, very late, and I don't have the energy to call it something else anymore. I chose wrong. I let go of the lap and the mornings and the smell of her head and the small particular weight of a child who has decided your lap is home, and I let it go for things I cannot even name now, things that seemed important in 1981 or 1986 or 1993, and that I cannot remember well enough to even defend. And then I stood at a bar on her wedding day and did something that cannot be undone. Imani, Jordan, I'm saying their names in this room. It is the only place I say them. This room, in the dark, at whatever this hour is, when the house is quiet, and the weight of everything I have not fixed is just weight, just what it is, not a feeling, but a fact. They are real children, living a real life. They have a grandmother on Yvette's side who probably knows their whole hearts. They have Raymond, who is their grandfather in the way that matters. They have a father who cried at the altar, and who, whatever I told him that night, has stayed and fought for something worth fighting for, and is still there, still in the house, still resident, while I am once again a guest who was never invited. I want them to be well. I want Denise to be the mother she deserved to have modelled for her and didn't, fully, not from me. I want Marcus to love her, without whatever seed I planted in him. And maybe he does. Maybe it grew and was dealt with and is gone. People do that. People root out what was planted and replace it with something better. I want to believe that. It gets very quiet now. The wind has stopped doing the thing to the gutters. The furnace has gone still. It is the deepest part of the night, the part that used to frighten me when I was young, and that now just feels like the truest part. The part where there is no more pretending that it is earlier than it is, no more telling yourself you'll sleep soon, no more waiting for a sound that explains the silence. This is what I have. This room, this dark, this age, this weight. These names I say to no one. My daughter is somewhere sleeping or not sleeping. My grandchildren are somewhere in the particular helplessness of childhood sleep, the deep kind, the kind that adults can't get back to. My sister will call on Sunday. The box is in the closet. I am Calvin Webb. I am 71 years old, and I am still the second man, the one who puts the letter in the box. And I have sat here long enough tonight to say that plainly, and let it be what it is without dressing it as anything else. That is maybe the most I can do now. Not send the letter, not become someone new, but sit here in the full honesty of what I am and what I did, and let it be witnessed, even if the only witness is the dark and whoever is sitting across from me in it. I am tired now, not the kind of tired that goes away with sleep. I should close my eyes. I should let the night be what it is. Denise, I said your name out loud again just now, in this room, and it didn't fix anything, and it wasn't supposed to, and it is the most true thing I have left to give. This saying of your name in the dark, where nobody hears it but me. This holding of you in a space where I cannot damage you anymore. I'm tired. I'm so tired now.